Tonight, we'll begin with something quiet. Not a discovery, not a breakthrough, just a pause. A moment to notice what it feels like right now to be aware of this sentence. To be inside a body, inside a room, inside a thought. That strange hum in your mind, that's not the fan. That's you humming softly to yourself. Your mind half awake, curious but not in a hurry. Just floating. Letting the lights stay dim. Letting the door to thought remain slightly ajar. We're not here to solve anything. We're just here to drift. Slowly. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening and what time it is for you. Let me know in the comments below. I'm always curious where these quiet little science stories are drifting, and if this video will help you when you're there. Now let's begin. Consciousness. It's a long, luxurious word. It stretches out in your mouth like a ribbon. Consciousness. But what does it actually mean? It's the one thing you can't escape even when you sleep. The thing behind your eyes always watching. It isn't a thing you do, it's something you are. If someone were to tap you on the shoulder in the middle of the night and ask, "Are you conscious?" you'd probably blink a few times and say, "Oh, I'm awake, aren't I?" But that's just one flavor of awareness, just one layer. There are other layers, subtler ones. The quiet noticing, the awareness of pain, of color, of time passing. The sense of being a me inside this body, watching thoughts drift by like clouds. And then, the watcher of those thoughts. The part of you that sees you thinking. It's like mirrors facing each other in a dressing room. A reflection of a reflection of a reflection. Where does it end? Maybe it doesn't. Some neuroscientists argue that consciousness is just the sum of information patterns in the brain, electrical signals bouncing from one region to another in rapid succession. That warm, thick fog you feel just before you drift off to sleep. They say that's just your neurons switching modes, going into background mode. But even if that's true, it doesn't feel like electricity. It feels velvety. Soft, like falling into warm water and forgetting the edge of your body. A single scientific fact. Here's a gentle one. When you close your eyes and begin to relax, your brain starts producing more alpha waves, a rhythm of about 8 to 12 hertz. It's associated with relaxed wakefulness, the gateway to daydreams and gentle sleep. Alpha is the mind's way of whispering. It's okay to let go. So when people say I'm drifting off, they aren't just being poetic. They're describing a measurable biological shift in brainwave frequencies, a literal drift from wakefulness into the dream tide. Imagine lying in a field feeling the sun on your closed eyelids, the red glow, the buzz of summer air. That soft veil of calm that settles just behind your forehead. That is alpha. That is awareness becoming quieter. And beneath it, there is still awareness. Just different. Dimmed. There's a curious metaphor ancient thinkers used to describe consciousness, a lamp in a cave. Always flickering but never extinguished. Sometimes it casts clear shadows on the walls. Other times it barely glows, but it's always burning. Sometimes when you're halfway between sleep and wakefulness, you feel like you've fallen behind your own thoughts. They seem to happen without your permission. A string of sentences forming, and you think, wait, did I say that, or did I just hear it in my mind? You're not alone in that. Everyone's thoughts occasionally misfire like that, especially when the mind gets drowsy. It's like your brain's speech center gets ahead of its logic. And here comes a little joke the universe likes to play, even when you feel most in control, say finishing a sentence, deciding to blink, or laughing at a joke. There's good evidence your brain has already decided for you. About 300 milliseconds before you thought you made the decision. So, Who's in charge? A part of you, behind the part of you that's listening now, like a puppeteer behind the curtain tugging threads you don't even know exist. But don't worry, that's not meant to unsettle you. If anything, it's a relief. You don't have to try so hard to be aware. You already are. Even in your sleep, your brain keeps humming, drifting between states, narrating the world to itself like a quiet bedtime story. Here's a little image for you to hold as you drift tonight. Imagine a warm lantern flickering softly inside your chest. Every breath you take makes it glow a little brighter. Every exhale cools the flame. That's your awareness, always there, always moving, but never leaving you. Maybe consciousness is just that, the experience of the flicker, the soft humming core of what it feels like to exist. Maybe it's not a thing at all. Maybe it's just the warm, low music playing behind the scenes of your thoughts, like a soundtrack you only notice when it pauses. Or maybe, and this one's just for fun, this whole world is something else's dream. Maybe you're the thought of a larger being halfway between asleep and awake. Who knows, right? But for now, there's no need to think too hard. Just stay with the feeling of being, the quiet presence of yourself. And if sleep comes, let it come. No effort, no resistance, just the gentle flow of awareness drifting slowly into silence. Somewhere in the quiet, something notices. Not the world, not the trees or the stars or the river moving slowly in the dark, but you, or rather that strange flicker inside you looking out. And then one day it looks at itself. There is something deliciously absurd about this fact, that a mind born of flesh, tangled in nerves and chemical whispers, somehow learned to step back and watch itself think. Like a dog trying to chase its own tail, only more philosophical. This is the mirror, not the one in your bathroom, not the silver glass that catches your face in the morning, but the internal mirror, the one that reflects the thought that just happened, the one that says, "That was me." This is what separates humans from most of the known animal kingdom, the strange awareness of awareness itself. What psychologists call metacognition, a thought about a thought, a feeling about a feeling. We take it for granted, of course. That internal chatter you hear all day, the one giving running commentary on what you're doing, it doesn't shut up. But what's more curious is who it thinks it's talking to. A bit like a one-person podcast streaming endlessly to an audience of exactly one. Or maybe none at all. Try this next time you're brushing your teeth. Notice the voice in your head. It might be reminding you of something, analyzing a weird conversation from earlier, or just singing the last line of a song. And then notice yourself noticing it. The mind turns inward like an echo bouncing off cave walls. It's here we begin to glimpse the paradox, that the very thing doing the watching is also what's being watched. No one knows exactly when humans began to experience this self-reflection. But archaeologists have found clues, burials with grave goods, ancient mirrors made of polished obsidian paintings of hands on cave walls. Not just survival, but representation. That handprint on a cave wall, was it art, a record? Or just a Neolithic person saying, "I was here. I existed. This is my shape." Or maybe it was the first selfie. Here's a fact that's quietly profound. The oldest known mirrors are from around 6000 BCE, found in Anatolia. Made of obsidian volcanic glass, highly polished. Imagine a human standing over it, seeing their own face reflected maybe for the first time. And something deep within goes, "Ah, that's me." And just like that, the mirror begins to watch. Of course, consciousness doesn't require mirrors, but mirrors show us something revealing, that our self-image is not stable. It wavers, adapts, forgets, and sometimes lies. There's a quiet little test used in psychology called the mirror self-recognition test. You place a mark on an animal's face while they're asleep, then show them a mirror. If they try to touch the mark on themselves, not the mirror, it's a sign of self-awareness. Only a handful of creatures pass it. Humans over the age of 18 months, elephants, dolphins, some great apes, a magpie, one octopus maybe. That's about it. So, what's happening there, is that really self-awareness, or just visual recognition tied to a clever trick? Maybe. Maybe not. There's an old philosophical idea from Descartes that says, "I think, therefore I am." But that might not go far enough. Because you can think without knowing you're thinking. You can do without choosing. So maybe a better version would be, I notice that I think, therefore I realize I am. Still, even that raises a question. Who's doing the noticing? The weirdness is that no matter how deeply you try to catch the real you, it slips. You can observe your thoughts, your sensations, even your emotional reactions. But you can't ever quite catch the observer itself, like trying to see your own eye without a mirror. And maybe that's why consciousness feels so slippery. Because the closer you get, the further away it goes. There's a soft joke here. The brain is like a stage actor that can never see the audience but always believes it's being watched. So it performs. Every day. Thinking about how it's thinking. Feeling about how it's feeling. Trying to keep up the illusion that there's someone behind the curtain pulling the strings. But maybe there isn't. Maybe it's all just a show for no one. Or maybe the watcher is just the watching itself. Still, humans build their entire lives on this flicker of inner sight. This mirror behind the mirror. It's why we journal, why we talk to ourselves, why we wake up from a dream and think, what did that mean? The brain wants narrative, wants to make sense of itself, so it reflects constantly. Building stories from fragments, meaning from motion. And here's something cozy to hold on to as you settle in tonight, even in the stillest moment when the mind is quiet, when no thoughts pass. The mirror remains, waiting, not needing to see anything. Just ready. Like a pond at night reflecting stars that aren't even there. Because sometimes consciousness doesn't need a thought to reflect, just the awareness that it could. And perhaps that's the most beautiful illusion of all. The body goes still, the room softens, and yet, awareness lingers. It's an odd contradiction how sleep can arrive without fully switching off the lights inside. Even as the world fades, something within continues to flicker. Dreams, for instance, the theater of the sleeping brain. Vivid, strange, sometimes senseless, and yet undeniably real while they're happening. Have you ever caught yourself inside a dream just before waking? That moment when you realize this is all made up, but it feels just like life. That's the paradox of consciousness. Even when the body sleeps, the mind often doesn't. It just changes stage sets. Here's something simple and wondrous. During certain stages of sleep, especially REM sleep, your brain becomes almost as active as when you're awake. The difference, your muscles are paralyzed. You're dreaming in a body that can't move while your brain is rehearsing life in a theater of pure imagination. If the brain can simulate reality that vividly, who's to say your current reality isn't just another simulation? And more curiously, who's watching the dream? We don't dream consciously, and yet something inside us remembers the dream. As if a shadow version of awareness remained scribbling notes just off stage. Maybe you've had this experience. You dreamt something so detailed, so wild, so real, that when you woke up you were surprised by the walls of your room. You looked at your own hands like they belonged to someone else. That fuzzy line between waking and dreaming has been a playground for thinkers for centuries. Even Shakespeare whispered, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on." And he might not have been far off. Consider this: babies spend nearly 50% of their sleep in REM, which is when most dreaming happens. Adults only get about 20 to 25%. No one really knows why, but it's possible that dreams are the brain's early way of booting up consciousness, like running simulations on a new operating system. So even before we can speak or recognize faces, our minds are already practicing being. A rehearsal for awareness, a sandbox for the self. And sometimes in the early morning hours, as sleep lightens, you may enter a state called hypnopompia, that in-between space when you're no longer fully asleep, but not quite awake either. In that space, thoughts take on strange shapes. You might hear a voice that isn't there, or feel like you're floating just slightly above your body. These are not malfunctions. They're features. Soft edges of a dreaming mind pulling itself slowly back into its waking mask. Maybe consciousness is not a switch, not something that turns on or off. Maybe it's more like a dimmer gliding up and down through states of being, not here or there, but in between. Now and then you might wonder, when I dream, is it the same me who's thinking? It feels familiar, but looser, more surreal, less filtered. That's the brain without its hall monitor. Free to wander, to mix metaphors, to let pigs fly and time melt like butter on a hot day. But still, something within those dreams knows it's you, even if your shape changes, even if your name is missing. There's a thread of identity that stays unbroken, as if awareness is deeper than the body it wears. Let's say you dream of being a fish. You swim in coral reefs, you feel your gills opening and the water flows past your fins. It's completely real in the moment. But when you wake up, you don't say, "I was imagining being a fish." You say, "I was a fish." That's how deep consciousness goes. It doesn't just observe, it becomes. Here's a quiet joke from neuroscience: your brain doesn't really see the world. It interprets electrical signals, guesses what's out there, and builds a mental model so convincing you rarely notice it's fake. Your dreams do the same thing, only without input. The simulation continues, just unplugged from the senses. So maybe dreaming isn't a departure from consciousness. Maybe it's just consciousness turned inward, freed from rules. Like a painter locked inside the studio, using old memories as paints and emotions as brushes. And what does that make you, the dreamer? The canvas or the artist? Both, probably. You create the story, you live it, and then when the alarm rings, you dissolve it like sugar in warm tea. Gone, but strangely sweet. That's the part that's hard to explain to someone who's never asked these questions, how awareness can be so real and yet so hard to define. Maybe that's why some people say consciousness is just an illusion. But here's the fun twist: illusions still require someone to be tricked. Which means there's still a watcher somewhere. Tonight, as you drift further into stillness, you might begin to feel your thoughts loosen. Words blur. Images appear behind your eyes. That's your brain transitioning, leaving the room quietly, like a host who doesn't want to wake the guest. Let it. There's no need to hold on. Just float. Because whether you're awake or dreaming, something deep within you is always humming, always becoming. Not quite here, not quite gone, just drifting. Imagine the world before mirrors, before speech, before memory, before names. Just water, rock, motion. And in that motion, one day, something flinches. A flicker, a twitch in a jelly-like form. Something simple, something soft. A response to light or pressure or heat. That twitch is the seed of consciousness, not a thought, not even a feeling. Just an echo, something happened and something moved in return. Somewhere 500 million years ago, a creature in the sea learned to respond to sunlight. Maybe not knew it was light, but reacted, moved toward it, swam away from cold, folded in when touched. These weren't thoughts. These were the first flickers. Simple life like sea sponges or coral don't have neurons, no brain, no central processing. But the moment nervous tissue emerged somewhere around 600 million years ago, it lit a tiny candle in the dark. The first nervous systems didn't think in any human sense. But they sent messages. They transmitted signals. And over millions of years, those signals became feelings. A sting, a pulse, a rhythm. And that rhythm became a kind of awareness. Not knowing but sensing. Responding, changing shape in reply to the world. Let's pause for a soft fact. One of the earliest known animals with a basic nervous system is the hydra, a tiny tubular freshwater creature. No brain, but it has a nerve net, a distributed pattern of sensory and motor cells. If you touch it, it curls. It doesn't know what you are, but it knows something changed. That's something. Maybe that's all consciousness really is, a way of noticing the difference between before and after. Imagine being a primitive sea creature, drifting in warm, shallow water. Your entire being is a floating mouth. You don't plan. You don't remember. You only feel there is food, or there isn't. And yet even that is something. A pattern. The tiniest hint of choice. And maybe that's enough to begin the story. There's a slow, humming comfort in this thought, that consciousness didn't arrive suddenly, like lightning hitting a rock. It crept, it bloomed, like a tide rising so gently you don't notice your feet have left the shore. Somewhere along the line, light-sensitive cells grouped together to form simple eyes. Not the kind that see color or depth, just patches that could tell light from dark. But from those patches came pursuit. Movement. The first step toward purpose. Light is useful. You follow it, you find warmth, or food, or escape. And in following light, perhaps the organism began to experience something like intention, even if it didn't know it. Like a sleepwalker moving through a dream. Eventually, those light patches evolved into complex eyes, able to form shapes, then motion, then detail. And with each step, the creature's internal map of the world sharpened. It could react faster, smarter. It could survive. Here's a quiet little riddle. Can you be aware of something if you don't remember it? Think of a jellyfish. Beautiful, ancient, undulating like a silk scarf underwater. It has no brain, just a loose nerve net and a rhythmic pulse. It can swim, sting hunt. And yet, does it know it's doing any of those things? Probably not. But it does them anyway. It's like a living poem with no narrator. But then come the worms, the insects, the fish. Nervous systems grow, feedback loops multiply, the brain emerges, and suddenly creatures don't just react, they learn. They remember. And memory, that's when time enters consciousness. A moment becomes a sequence. A pattern becomes a self. Imagine an ancient trilobite scuttling along the seabed 500 million years ago. It detects vibration. It hides. It crawls, and over time its reactions become conditioned. A sort of proto-choice appears. Not thought, not language, but habit, a sense of what comes next. That's the kind of awareness you don't have to think about, the kind that happens at the edge of being, like muscle memory, or reaching for a light switch in the dark and finding it without looking. Maybe we still carry that in us, those older layers of perception. The ones that don't talk, that just know, like when you sense someone behind you before they speak, or when your body tenses before your mind registers a threat. Those reactions are old, deeper than words, deeper than thought. They come from the part of you that's closer to the hydra than the philosopher, and maybe that's something to treasure. Because it means consciousness wasn't given to us. It grew inside us, slowly, generously. It means you are a long, glowing thread of awareness stretching back millions of years. From sponge to worm to fish to primate to you, eyes blinking in the dark, mind drifting between thoughts. And here you are, lying still, listening. A creature that once flinched in the ocean tide now hears stories about itself before sleep. Isn't that lovely? And as you sink deeper into stillness, remember this: even the tiniest flicker matters. Even the most primitive form of awareness was the beginning of something vast. It began with a twitch, and it led to you. Long before language, long before tools or fire or fear of death, there was motion, and then eventually something like thought. But not all thoughts needed a brain. That might sound strange, maybe even wrong, but nature rarely plays by our rules of simplicity. Some of the most mysterious forms of awareness seem to belong to creatures without anything we'd call a brain at all. Consider the octopus, a being with 3 hearts, blue blood, and skin that can see. Most of its neurons aren't in its head, but spread out along its arms. Each arm can taste touch and react almost independently. And yet it thinks, solves puzzles, escapes jars, plays. If we met something like an octopus on another planet, we wouldn't just call it an animal. We'd call it an intelligence. Now stretch that thought back in time past the octopus, past the jellyfish, all the way to brainless life, to the slime mold. Not exactly an organism you think of as smart, just a yellow blob. But here's the strange part: it solves mazes. If you put food at both ends and obstacles in the way, it finds the most efficient path. No eyes, no mouth, no neurons, just flow, just noticing. Maybe not self-awareness as we know it, but something. A preference. A memory of where food was last time. An avoidance of pain. Even plants with no brains at all respond to light and gravity, touch and sound. Roots grow toward running water even when the pipe is hidden underground. Leaves lean toward music. Vines remember where they've touched a wall and decide whether to climb. No, it's not consciousness in the human sense, but it's hard to call it nothing. And so we begin to wonder, where does the boundary really lie? Here's a thought experiment whispered in the corners of philosophy. Imagine consciousness not as a light switch on or off, but as a dimmer, a gentle gradient. Some beings shine bright, others glow faintly, and others just flicker. If that's true, then even a bacterium, simple, ancient, almost invisible, might contain the seed of awareness, the tiniest twitch of knowing. And that means you, in all your complexity, might be the shimmering tip of a long, slow wave that started billions of years ago. You are not above nature. You are its continuation. You are not a different thing. You are the thing looking at itself. And that leads to something soft, something slow, something surprising. Even if consciousness is rare, if it only appears in the most tangled minds, then life still carries its potential like a song waiting to be hummed. But if it's common, if the experience of being is everywhere, even dimly, then you're not alone in the way you think you are. Not truly. A coral reef pulsing in sunlight. A tree leaning toward the moon. a colony of ants building bridges from their own bodies. They are not thinking like we do, but they are doing. They are feeling in some minimal sense the edges of the world, the before and after, the touch and retreat. Somewhere deep in the forest, a mushroom mycelium spreads underground, sending signals, exchanging nutrients, even warning nearby trees of danger. This network has been called the Wood Wide Web. But it doesn't need to be clever. It just needs to work. And maybe that's what early consciousness was. Not cleverness, just presence. A form of being that noticed more than it used to. Let's drift back in time again. Picture a small worm-like creature swimming through ancient seas. It doesn't think about tomorrow. It doesn't name itself. But when it moves with purpose, avoids the cold, turns toward warmth. There, in that motion, consciousness stirs. A feeling, maybe, or less than a feeling. A ripple of preference. And that preference becomes a habit. That habit becomes a brain. That brain becomes a question. And that question becomes you. Some scientists resist this view. They say consciousness is an emergent property of complexity, only appearing once a brain is tangled enough. But others, soft-spoken, thoughtful voices in quiet corners, whisper a wilder idea that consciousness might be fundamental. Not something built, but something revealed, like light through glass. The more complex the creature, the clearer the window. And if that's true, well, maybe the glass was always glowing, even in the beginning, even before we had the words to notice. There's a stillness in that thought, a softness. That awareness wasn't a lightning strike. It was a sunrise, slow, gentle, gradual, a long awakening that never truly stops. So tonight, as your breath grows slower and your thoughts become dimmer, remember this. You are not a machine with a brain bolted on top. You are not a passenger in a body. You are the tip of an ancient wave of perception, older than words, older than memory, older than the name you go by. And just like the octopus in the deep sea, you don't need to understand every part of yourself to be real. You just need to feel the current move. Let it. Float with it. Drift. Because even now, even here, something in you is still reaching toward the light. What if everything is already conscious, not in the way you are, not with stories or choices or Sunday morning regrets, but in the quiet, flickering way of being that simply is? It's called panpsychism, this idea, that consciousness is not some late-arriving miracle in the universe, but something embedded from the very beginning. Not all or nothing, but like heat or mass or gravity, a property, a presence, a gentle hum. To a stone it might feel like nothing, but maybe even that nothing has texture. Maybe even that stillness has tone. Of course, this sounds strange at first. How could a rock be aware it doesn't respond? It doesn't remember. It doesn't write poetry about other rocks. But maybe we're using the wrong measure. Maybe awareness doesn't mean complex thought. Maybe it just means something it is like to exist. Imagine this: the world is full of radio stations. Some blare rock and roll, others whisper talk radio, and some only hum static. But they're all on. You with your brain full of networks and feedback and emotion, you're a high-powered stereo. But that doesn't mean the stone is off. It just means its volume is very, very low. That's one interpretation. It's not scientific in the conventional sense. No fMRI machine can scan a pebble and find a dream inside, but the concept serves a purpose. It softens the edges between us and everything else. And in the middle of the night, when you're half asleep and your hand brushes the cool surface of the nightstand. Maybe there's a tiny mutual noticing. Not thought. Not language. Just a quiet recognition you are here. It is here. And the space between is not so empty after all. A small, strange fact: physicist Roger Penrose once proposed that consciousness might be tied to quantum activity within brain microtubules, tiny structures inside your neurons. He suggested that what we think of as awareness might be a quantum process, something woven into the fabric of reality itself. Whether he's right or not, the point lingers. What if the feeling of being is not made by the brain, but revealed through it, like a candle illuminating a room that was already full of shadows? Maybe awareness is not something we do. Maybe it's something we channel. Even now, lying still, your body is radiating low levels of infrared heat. Your cells are exchanging ions. Your brain is emitting tiny electromagnetic fields. These are facts. But does that mean they are aware? Not necessarily. But perhaps, just perhaps, there is no hard line. Perhaps consciousness doesn't emerge at a certain point. It thickens, gathers, swirls, like steam on a mirror. We talk about being self-aware as if it's a trophy, something that separates us from the animals, the insects, the stones. But maybe we're not special in that way. Maybe we're just louder. The universe may be full of awarenesses we will never understand, because our questions are too sharp, too narrow, like trying to catch mist with chopsticks. There's a joke hidden here, lightly told, half asleep. Maybe the reason we haven't met other intelligent beings in the galaxy is because they're all around us, just slower, quieter, not moving on legs or floating in ships, but growing in silence, stretching in light, listening in forms we don't recognize. Maybe your pillow is not a thinker, but it holds your shape, receives your warmth, cradles your skull through 1,000 nights. That's not intelligence. That's not love, but it's something. And who are we to say where experience ends? So much of modern thought is built on divisions: living versus non-living, awake versus asleep, conscious versus not. But the more we look, the blurrier it all becomes. Sleep is not unconsciousness. It's another kind of consciousness. A virus isn't quite alive, but it behaves as if it wants to be. And a coral reef composed of thousands of tiny polyps, each blind and brainless, somehow becomes a vibrant city of exchange and color and growth. The world is full of these soft boundaries. So maybe consciousness is not a place we arrive, but a river we're always swimming in. Some of us just notice the current more than others. Tonight, as your thoughts slow, as the bed cradles your limbs, and the air thickens with rest, consider this: the atoms in your hand came from stars, from oceans, from ancient rocks, and those atoms still hum with the quiet rhythm of existence. Not special, not enlightened, just present. And that presence, that beingness, might be the most universal thing there is. You are not separate from the world. You are the world. Noticing itself. A hand moves, reaches for a glass, lifts it, drinks. And only afterward a thought arises: I decided to do that. But did you? This is one of consciousness's gentlest tricks, that the story of control is written after the fact, that what feels like free will may in truth be more like narration. You are not the pilot. You are the voice in the cockpit saying, "We just made a sharp left turn a split second after the plane has already tilted. Let's make that real." In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet ran a now-famous experiment. Participants were asked to flex their wrists whenever they felt the urge. They also had to note the exact moment they became aware of the decision. But the kicker electrodes showed brain activity the decision to move nearly half a second before the participants reported choosing it. The brain decided before the eye was informed, like a surprise party, thrown by your own neurons. You didn't RSVP, but you still showed up. That raises a quiet question, wrapped in soft confusion. If you are not the one choosing, what exactly are you? Maybe you are the echo, the narrator, the afterglow of a process already in motion. It doesn't mean your choices aren't real, it means the experience of choosing may be a story your mind tells itself to stay calm. Because a story is easier to live in than chaos. It's comforting to believe there's a driver behind the wheel, even if sometimes the car is steering itself. And most of the time, that story works beautifully. The illusion is seamless. But once in a while, just once, you catch it. Like when your mouth says something before your brain finishes thinking it. Or when your hand flinches before a noise even registers. Or when you solve a problem in a dream without trying. Where did those answers come from? From the machinery beneath the surface. From the quiet you beneath the you. Here's a soft scientific fact to hold tonight. Your default mode network, a system of brain regions, becomes active when you're not focused on a task. When you daydream, when you're at rest. It hums gently in the background, tying your story together. It fills in the blanks. It keeps the you narrative intact. And most of the time it works, but sometimes it makes you feel like you're the author of thoughts you didn't write. A philosopher might call this a self-model, a simulation of agency your brain builds to keep track of itself. But in practice, it means your brain is doing a puppet show and the puppet thinks it's in charge. Still, is that a problem? Probably not. Because even if you're not writing the script, you're the one feeling it. You experience the emotions, the regrets, the hope. You cry at the ending. You cheer for the twist. The story moves through you. That counts for something. Even if it's not a choice, it's still real. And maybe that's where the beauty lies. There's a kindness in letting go of full control. A relief. The pressure lifts. You don't have to drive the whole machine. You can drift. You can breathe. You can feel the river carry you and know that it's enough. Think of your breath. You can choose to control it. Take a deep one now if you like, but most of the time, you don't. It just happens. Inhale. Exhale. Soft, steady, unnoticed. Like thought. Like motion. Like awareness itself. It's okay not to be in charge of every part. You never were. And still, you're here. Present. Aware. Wondering. Maybe that's the truest part of consciousness, not that it controls, but that it witnesses. Like a wind chime catching the breeze. You're not choosing the wind, but you're the one singing when it comes. Here's a gentle image to drift with. Picture a meadow at dawn. The mist still lingers. Nothing stirs. And then slowly the petals of a wildflower begin to open. Not because they chose to, but because the light returned. Awareness might be like that. Not a captain at the helm. Just a flower turning gently toward warmth. And that is enough. Somewhere inside your skull, in darkness deeper than night, billions of tiny sparks are flickering. They do not glow. They do not hum. They simply fire. One neuron after another sending electrical signals down delicate threads of matter. Chains of communication. Like whispers passed down a long hallway. And out of that you, your moods, your memories, your laughter at something no one else found funny, your sadness on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when nothing had gone wrong. All of it. Somehow, from that, we tend to think of consciousness as something soft and mysterious, and it is, but it's also built in a sense from machinery, from cells, from chemistry, from tissue shaped by time. This is the ghost in the machinery. Only, maybe there's no ghost, just the machinery. And maybe that's okay. Your brain, about 1.3 kilograms of matter, holds nearly 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others. Trillions of tiny synaptic bridges crossing gaps thinner than dust. And yet these mechanical parts give rise to experience. That moment you tasted mint tea and remembered your grandmother's kitchen. That warm ache in your chest when a friend said just the right thing. That flicker of déjà vu in a hotel you'd never been in before. All of it comes from patterns. Not magic, not mystery, but electric pulses and biochemical dances. And still, none of it feels like electricity. No one has ever said, "Ah, this headache feels exactly like a potassium ion leaving a membrane," because consciousness is not experienced as its mechanisms. It's experienced through them, like music from a violin. You hear the melody, not the tension of the string. Here's a soft little scientific note. The thalamus deep in your brain is sometimes called the gateway to consciousness. It's involved in filtering sensory information, deciding what reaches awareness and what stays in the noise. It's like a quiet editor working behind the scenes, letting in the light, leaving out the thunder. But that editor doesn't have opinions. It doesn't feel. It just roots. So where's the feeling? No one really knows. We can track correlates of consciousness, brain areas that light up when you see red or remember a smell. But no one has found the single place where experience happens, because there may not be one. Maybe awareness isn't in a place. Maybe it's in a pattern. In the dance, not the dancer. And so the question shifts. From where is consciousness to what kinds of patterns give rise to it? It's like asking, when do waves become the ocean? When does motion become mind? A philosopher might say it's emergent, something that appears when parts combine in just the right way. Not reducible, not quite explainable, just appearing. And yet we live inside this emergence, every day. You're not aware of your neurons, but you are aware of a feeling, a thought, a sudden longing for a place you've never been, like a castle made of matchsticks. You don't see the individual pieces, just the shape they form. Sometimes that shape breaks. In brain injury and coma, in certain rare conditions, parts of consciousness fracture. Memory disappears. Language vanishes. Faces no longer register. And yet, something remains. Some quiet part that still watches, that still feels, that still says, I. That's the strange resilience of awareness. It's not all or nothing. It's layered. You can lose your sense of time, but still feel pain. You can forget your name, but still enjoy music. You can fall into sleep and still dream in color. And all of this comes from flesh, from cells floating in cerebrospinal fluid, from molecules reacting to molecules. It feels too mechanical to be you. And yet, it is. You are the most beautifully improbable machine. So precise, so delicate, so completely you. But maybe that's the poetry of it. That something as raw as carbon and calcium and sugar can become Shakespeare or laughter or longing. That a spark between neurons can become the memory of your mother's voice. that a pulse of dopamine can feel like love. And as you lie still, your own neurons are firing right now. Tiny, quiet flashes, some holding on to this sentence, some preparing your body to rest, some just repeating old patterns from long ago. You are not separate from this dance. You are the dance, not the puppeteer, not the puppet, but the motion between them. So don't worry about finding the ghost. There's enough wonder in the machine. If you sit very still, so still that even your thoughts begin to hush, and ask yourself gently, who am I really? No answer comes. Not right away. Maybe you hear your name in your mind, or see a face, maybe a profession floats up, a memory, a role. But those are costumes, labels, paper masks held up by habit. Keep sitting, keep asking, and you may find the self begins to dissolve. Not vanish, just become mist. Try it sometime, stare at yourself in the mirror for long enough in silence, and you might see your reflection begin to feel less like you and more like a stranger. Familiar, but other. The self is slippery like that. For most of us, it feels like there's a solid me inside a little person in the head, pulling levers, steering the ship, storing memories in neat little drawers. But neuroscience tells a different story. There is no central command center, no core, just modules, systems, habits, and processes all working together, giving the illusion of one unified self. But it's more like a village, a collection of voices, some loud, some quiet, some that only come out at night. Here's something you may have noticed: you don't always feel like the same person. Not day to day. Sometimes not even hour to hour. The version of you that gives good advice to friends might be the same one who forgets to drink water. The version that solves complex problems might also cry watching a cartoon. You're not one self. You're a stream of selves, woven into continuity by memory and story. But there's no single thread underneath. And that's not a failure. That's how you work. Here's a quiet little scientific finding to cradle tonight. Brain imaging shows that the areas involved in self-reflection are the same ones involved in imagining other people's thoughts, which suggests that maybe yourself as you know it is just another character your brain constructs. You are your own social story, and like all good stories, it changes over time. Remember who you were 5 years ago, 10, and can you still feel the shape of that person? Probably not. But you believe there was a you back then. Just as you believe there's one now. That's the continuity illusion. It keeps us sane. It gives us identity. But sometimes in dreams or late at night, in that still soft hour between thoughts, you glimpse the space between those masks. And in that space, there is no solid person. Just presence. Just awareness. Just this. This moment. This breath. This noticing. There's a comfort in letting go of the need for a fixed self. A freedom. You don't have to always be the same. You can shift. You can soften. You can forget and begin again. Maybe that's why sleep feels so good, not just for the body, but for the mind. It lets the self dissolve for a while. No roles, no name, just drifting. And when you wake up, the self assembles again, like a paper crane being folded in reverse. You remember where you are, what you were doing, who you were supposed to be, and you go on. But now you know the secret, that you are not the crane. You are the folding, not the person, but the pattern. And that pattern is always changing, always becoming, like a flame never the same twice but still recognizably itself. So if tonight your thoughts feel scattered, or you find yourself remembering something awkward from years ago, or wondering who you really are deep down, let the question go. Let it float. There is no final answer, just breath, just motion, just the gentle knowing that whatever you are, it's enough to be here, to notice, to feel, to drift. And as sleep begins to pull you under, think of this: you do not need to hold yourself together. You were never broken, only unfolding. Inside the quiet of the mind, there is a voice. It doesn't speak with lips. It doesn't pause to breathe. It never leaves. You might be hearing it now, softly narrating as you read. Maybe it's reading this sentence to you. Maybe it just said, "Yes, I hear that. It's always there." The voice that says, "I, me, mine." The one that whispers opinions about the way your socks feel, judges strangers in passing, remembers to buy eggs, and then forgets again. We call it the inner monologue. And for some, it's constant. Others live with quieter minds, more image than sentence, more color than commentary. But for those of us with a steady narrator, it's easy to forget that the voice isn't you. It's just something the brain does. It's thought pretending to be speech. Imagine a theater, dim, warm, and still, and in the center a single spotlight on a character who never leaves the stage. That's the voice. But behind the stage in the dark, the audience is changing. The walls breathe. The whole building rearranges itself while the voice carries on. You don't notice the changes. You're focused on the speech, and that's the trick. The voice feels stable, so we assume the self must be stable too. But as we've already seen, there is no fixed center, just a swirl of processes, emotions, memories, reactions, and somehow in that swirl a voice rises, like foam on the surface of a deep ocean. Here's a gentle scientific observation. To cradle tonight, brain scans show that the default mode network, the one we visited earlier, is most active when the mind is wandering, not solving problems, not observing the outside world, just thinking to itself. That network hums in silence. It forms the background music of the self. But here's the odd part: when experienced meditators quiet their inner monologue, that network dims. The sense of me softens. The thoughts fall away. And what's left? Just awareness. Just the stage. No actor, no script. For a few moments the play ends, and the world doesn't disappear. It just becomes still. If the voice is so persistent, why do we not always hear it in dreams? Sometimes we do, but not always. Because dreams often bypass the narrator. They speak in symbols, in movement, in feeling. They don't need grammar, which raises a question: why does consciousness need a narrator at all? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the voice is just the brain's way of rehearsing, planning, reflecting. A survival tool dressed up as poetry. Maybe it's there not to tell the truth, but to keep the story moving. And stories, they're powerful. They're how we remember who we are, how we imagine who we might become. But sometimes the voice becomes too loud, too sharp. It begins to judge. It loops. It fixates. It takes old fears and plays them back like broken vinyl. And when that happens, it helps to remember it's just the voice, not truth, not prophecy, just narration. You can let it speak, and you can also let it drift away like a radio turning down in the distance. Sometimes late at night you might notice the voice talking to no one, planning imaginary conversations, replaying the day, arguing with people who aren't there. It's not madness. It's the brain's way of processing, sorting the pieces, trying to find the pattern. But you don't have to believe every word. Here's a small, strange truth monks and mystics across cultures, from desert fathers to Zen practitioners, have spoken of: a moment when the inner voice falls silent. Not with effort, not with force, but through stillness, through letting go. And in that silence, something else arises. Not another voice, just space, just a vast, quiet noticing. As if the spotlight turns outward and suddenly you're no longer watching the actor, you're seeing the theater itself. So tonight, as your inner monologue begins to mumble and slow, don't try to chase it. Let it speak if it must. Let it repeat itself if it wants. But know that you are not the voice. You are the listening. You are the space it echoes in. You are the silence between words. And if that silence grows wider tonight, like a field stretching beneath stars, let it. No story needs to be told right now. No conclusions need to be reached. The voice can sleep, and so can you. What if the brain isn't required at all? What if awareness can bloom, even in places where no neuron has ever fired? That's not a riddle. It's a question many scientists have asked softly, cautiously, on long walks through the forest, or while watching slime mold solve puzzles, or when standing before a banyan tree that's older than civilization. The mind recoils, of course. How could a mushroom be conscious, or a plant, or a single-celled organism without even a hint of a nervous system? But then, the mushroom recoils too. Not from confusion, but literally. Certain fungi can retract, change direction, and even remember the location of food. They share nutrients, warn each other of toxins, exchange chemical signals with trees. They form underground networks that span entire forests, what some scientists have called the Wood Wide Web. Is that intelligence or just biology? Hard to say. But here's a quiet, lovely example. The Physarum polycephalum, a single-celled slime mold, can solve mazes. If placed at one end with food at the other, it explores, retracts from dead ends, and eventually slithers its way through the most efficient path. No brain, no nervous system, just action memory preference. Something that looks suspiciously like intention. And that raises a question soft enough to fall asleep with. Is consciousness the same as thinking? Or could it be something simpler, like noticing, or even just reacting in a way that implies a sense of time, of change, of before and after? Plants do this too. They lean toward light. Their roots grow toward underground water even when it's hidden. They release chemical distress signals when attacked. Some even recognize their kin. In one study, researchers played the sound of running water near a group of pea plants. The roots grew toward the speaker. Somehow they detected the vibration not by sound, but by some subtle cue in their surroundings. No ears, no brain, just awareness in another form. Even stranger, the Venus flytrap, a plant that snaps shut when its tiny hairs are touched only if two contacts occur within about 20 seconds. It's a timing mechanism, a primitive memory, and it requires electrical signals to operate. Yes, plants generate bioelectricity, not as a thought, not as a feeling, but as a kind of signal, a whisper, a threshold being crossed. That's not consciousness in the human sense, but it might be the beginning of something, a prelude, a soft awareness of the world without concepts or language, which invites us to imagine maybe consciousness doesn't begin with a brain, but with any system complex enough to detect change and respond meaningfully to it. And maybe our problem isn't with other forms of awareness. Maybe it's with our definitions. We want consciousness to mean us, to mean language, narrative, drama, decision. But what if it's wider? What if it's a river that flows through mushrooms, trees, insects, and brains alike, but in different forms, some fast, some slow, some full of dreams, some without thought? Not better or worse, just different. There's a Japanese word, komorebi. It means the dappled sunlight that filters through leaves. No direct translation exists in English. Just the feeling. That's the sort of awareness we're talking about. Something real, but hard to name. So let's drift gently toward another edge case. The cuttlefish. A cephalopod cousin to the octopus with incredible camouflage. It changes color pattern, even texture, to blend into its surroundings. But what's curious is when it does this. Not just when it's visible. Sometimes when it's alone in a tank. Sometimes in its sleep. Yes, cuttlefish appear to dream, or something close to it. Their skin pulses with patterns while they rest. Could it be a dream about coral reefs? About prey, about cuttlefish life? We don't know. But we're learning slowly that the line between conscious and not is not a line at all. It's a cloud, a spectrum, and your place in it is just one bright flicker among many. So tonight, as you lie there listening, breathing, being, you're not alone in that awareness. Somewhere a whale floats under the ice, half asleep, listening to echoes. Somewhere a mushroom shifts direction. Somewhere a tree leans into moonlight, not knowing, but still responding. Still here. Still part of the same wide breathing world. And you're the part that wonders about it all, that dreams about dreaming, that asks what it means to be. Let that be enough. Let it be a comfort. The universe is not silent. It's just full of languages we haven't learned to hear. Even when the world goes dark, something remains awake. That's one of the most surprising things about sleep. We think of it as unconsciousness, as turning off, but in truth, it's just a different kind of light. Softer, inward, flickering behind closed eyes. You don't stop being conscious in sleep. You just shift forms. Think about it. You lie down, your body stills, your breath slows, and suddenly you're somewhere else. Running across impossible landscapes. Meeting people who don't exist. Feeling emotions triggered by nothing but internal suggestion. Dreams are experience. They have structure, time, color, emotion. But where do they come from, and who is watching them? It's tempting to say dreams are nonsense, just the brain firing randomly. But if that's true, why do they feel so meaningful? Why do they linger in your body like memory even when the plot fades? There's a soft little fact to rest your thoughts on during REM sleep. Your brain waves resemble those of wakefulness. The same patterns of electrical activity, just rerouted. You're still conscious in a way, but in a private cinema watching a movie that's only for you. You're the screen. You're the actor. You're the watcher. And when you wake up, you remember or not. The boundary between sleep and wakefulness isn't as clear as we once believed. It's porous, blurry. Even when you're not dreaming, your brain remains active, just differently. During slow-wave sleep, it consolidates memories, replays motor actions, filters noise from signal. It's working quietly in the background, like a night janitor tidying the corridors of thought. Some parts shut down. But awareness, it never fully leaves. Even in the deepest sleep stages, your brain responds to your name, or a baby's cry, or the creak of a door. Not always enough to wake you, but enough to shift something inside. Because consciousness doesn't just disappear. It steps aside. One theory, gentle poetic, is that sleep is when the narrative self takes a break. The voice we explored earlier goes quiet. The stream of thoughts softens, and what's left is the experiential self, the one that just feels. No commentary, just sensation, like sinking into warm water and forgetting the shore. And maybe that's why sleep feels so restorative. Not just because the body repairs itself, but because the mind is allowed to stop performing, to stop arranging itself into a shape called you, to stop trying. Instead, it just is. Some traditions, Tibetan dream yoga for example, train practitioners to remain lucid during sleep, to stay aware of awareness itself, not clinging to the dream, not controlling it, but witnessing, gently, like watching ripples form in still water. They say in those moments you touch something deeper, a kind of pure consciousness, the watcher behind the watcher. You don't need to believe that, but maybe you've felt it. That sensation just before sleep when you're not thinking exactly, but you're not gone either. When images rise unbidden and your body feels like a memory. When your thoughts grow rounder, slower, echoing like soft bells in a distant hallway, that's the space between. And in that space, something subtle happens. Your brain begins to unself, not vanish, just loosen. And in that loosening, strange things become possible. You can be a child again, or a wolf, or a leaf on the wind. You don't question it. You just experience. And that experience is consciousness, just freed from the need to make sense. Maybe that's what dreams are for, not to teach or warn or sort, but simply to remind us that we are more than the daylight version of ourselves, that there are depths beneath our surface. And in those depths, light still moves, awareness still hums. So as you drift tonight, let your mind go soft. Let the story pause. Let the self unspool into something lighter. And remember, even as your eyes close, even as your muscles relax, even as the room fades, a quiet part of you stays, watching the tide, listening for stars, being. Imagine for a moment that there are two yous, not in theory, not in metaphor, but literally two separate streams of consciousness, housed in a single skull. That's not science fiction. It's the quiet, strange reality revealed by split brain studies. In certain rare cases, usually to treat severe epilepsy, doctors have performed a procedure called corpus callosotomy, in which the bundle of nerves connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain, the corpus callosum, is severed. The goal: stop the electrical storm of seizures from spreading between hemispheres. The result: hell. That's where things get uncanny. Because when the connection between the two sides is cut, each hemisphere begins to operate independently. Not just in motor control, but in awareness, in perception, in self. You might show one image to the left visual field which connects to the right brain, and a different image to the right visual field which connects to the left. The person sees both, but only the left hemisphere can speak. So if you ask what they saw, they'll only describe what the right eye perceived. But if you ask them to draw what the left eye saw with their left hand controlled by the right brain, they can. The brain knew, but the person couldn't say how, because the you that speaks didn't have access to the full picture. It's like meeting someone who knows your secrets, but won't explain why. Some researchers went further. They asked questions to each hemisphere separately. One side believed in God, the other didn't. One side liked math, the other preferred art. Two streams of opinion. Thought. Selfhood. All within one person. And yet to the outside world, they seemed whole, normal, a single consciousness. But inside the mirror was cracked. This is not a horror story. There's no tragedy here. Just a gentle dismantling of an idea we've long held sacred, that the self is unified. Because in truth, it isn't. Even in a brain that hasn't been surgically altered, the mind is full of contradiction. Conflicting desires, opposing impulses, internal arguments with no clear winner. You've felt it surely wanting and not wanting something at the same time. That's the chorus within you. And maybe in the quiet, you can begin to hear their voices separately. The practical one, the dreamer, the child, the judge, all fragments, all real, and yet, somehow they form a whole, or at least the illusion of one. There's a soft fact to carry into sleep, even in a single healthy brain time itself, is processed differently in each hemisphere. One side sees cause and effect in sequence, the other absorbs the whole picture at once. Even reality isn't synchronized. And still you feel whole. You feel singular. That's the brilliance of consciousness. It doesn't need to be consistent. It just needs to feel like a story, like a dream you don't realize is a dream until it ends. Or maybe not even then. Perhaps that's why we sleep so well, because at night the divisions no longer matter. The hemispheres talk again. They whisper in chemical lullabies. They trade dreams like postcards. The self unifies not through logic, but through feeling. And in the morning you wake, and you are you again. Not because you've solved yourself, but because you've remembered the shape of your mask. And it fits, but somewhere deep inside you know you are not one. You are a parliament. You are a library of selves, some hidden on high shelves, some reread often. And if tonight, as sleep begins to gather at your edges, you feel yourself becoming less distinct, let it happen. You do not need to stay whole. You can let your parts drift. You can let each hemisphere dream its own soft dream. And in the morning they'll return to each other as they always do. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to call yourself a person. Enough to say memory is a gentle liar. It means well, mostly. It tries to be helpful. But it rewrites, reshapes, and reimagines more than we often realize. You think you remember your 5th birthday. The frosting, the balloons, the dog stealing a piece of cake. But if you dig a little deeper, ask a few questions, you may find that the frosting changed color. The dog was from a different year. The memory may not even be yours. Just a photograph you've seen too many times. Memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction. Each time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it, like modeling clay. And when you put it back on the shelf, it doesn't return quite the same. Here's a small, strange scientific fact to hold softly: the hippocampus. The brain's memory librarian helps you simulate the future using pieces of your past. So memory isn't just for remembering, it's for predicting. You don't just recall what happened. You ask what might happen next, and so your memories become tools. Tools with dents and fingerprints. You reach for them not because they're perfect, but because they help you navigate the unknown. This is where the idea of the self gets tangled, because so much of who you think you are is memory. I'm the kind of person who is always a sentence that begins with stories. Some told, some repeated, some imagined. But if those stories are unstable, if they change each time you retrieve them, then who are you really? Maybe the puppet strings are held by a puppeteer with amnesia. And yet, that doesn't feel like a loss, because there's something tender in how the brain protects you. How it edits out the worst details, softens the sharp edges, adds sunlight where there was shadow, like a parent whispering, "You're okay now." Think of your earliest memory. Can you be sure it's real? Maybe it's just a feeling, a color, a smell. Maybe it's not a memory at all, but a story someone told you folded into your identity like a quilt square. Still, it matters. Because the brain doesn't prioritize truth. It prioritizes continuity. It wants a self that makes sense. Even if that self is built on half-remembered Tuesday afternoons and dreams mistaken for fact. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe that's the art. Because even when the facts shift, the feeling remains. You remember how it felt to laugh with a friend, to lose something precious, to walk into a room and forget why you're there. And those feelings form the true skeleton of your story. You aren't the facts of your life. You are the felt sense of it. The texture, the tone, the memory of standing in a warm hallway or seeing snow fall in a city you can't quite name. And as you fall asleep, that same memory engine keeps humming, replaying old dreams, stitching together new ones, weaving narratives from static. Sometimes you wake up and remember your dream clearly, only to have it vanish like mist before breakfast. Other times it lingers heavy and strange, as if it meant something, as if it was something. And who knows, maybe it was. Maybe the dreaming brain is just memory set free, allowed to recombine itself without judgment or logic, to remember not just what happened, but what could have, what might, what still aches. Some people fear forgetting, but there's a gentle peace in it. Forgetting is not erasure. It's pruning. It makes room. And sometimes what's left behind is clearer than what came before. So tonight, if old memories come, welcome them. But if they slip away, let them. You don't need to hold on to every moment. You are not the curator of a perfect archive. You are the wave that carries memory forward, reshaping as it flows. You are the echo that remembers being a voice. And that is enough. There's a mirror in the forest, not a real one. Of course, no polished glass, no silvered frame. Just a pond still as sleep, reflecting the shape of an animal looking down at itself. A crow, maybe. Or a dolphin pausing mid-swim to study the bubble trail it just made. Or an elephant pressing its trunk gently against its own reflection. It's in these moments, silent, without narration, that the question of self-awareness emerges beyond humans. Not as myth, not as metaphor, but as something real, measurable, glimpsed. Certain animals, as we've gently touched on before, recognize themselves in mirrors. It's called the mirror test, a classic experiment in animal cognition. A spot is placed somewhere on an animal's body where they can't see it directly, only in a reflection. If they notice the mark and try to inspect or remove it, it's considered a sign of self-recognition. A clue that the animal understands. That is me. Not just a body, but this body. Not just a face, but my face. Humans typically pass the test around 18 months of age. Before that, babies will smile at their reflection or try to touch the other baby. But slowly, something shifts. They begin to realize, this is not someone else. This is me. Elephants have passed the test. So have magpies, dolphins, great apes, and even manta rays, each one in its own way demonstrating a glimmer of awareness that reaches beyond instinct or learned behavior. It's not proof of deep thought, but it's a quiet signal, a ripple on the surface of a deeper lake. We want to draw lines. This species is conscious. This one is not. This brain is big enough. That one is too small. But the more we look, the more the lines blur. A raven solves a puzzle with tools it invents on the spot. An octopus opens a jar from the inside. A dog dreams twitching its paws. Consciousness doesn't arrive in a thunderclap. It seeps. It unfolds. It peers back sometimes. You might be walking through a field and feel the eyes of a cow follow you. You look back. There's something there, not human, not verbal, but there. A kind of watching. And in that moment, the air feels different, shared. Of course, there are critics of the mirror test. They argue that not all animals rely on vision. That self-awareness might exist in creatures who don't respond to mirrors simply because mirrors don't mean anything to them. Fair. Imagine judging your own consciousness based on your reaction to smell. How would you do, or sound, or magnetism? Because these two are ways of knowing. A dog may not pass the mirror test, but it can recognize the scent of its own urine as distinct from that of others. That's a form of self-recognition, just not the kind that's visible to us, so maybe the test is wrong. Not because it fails to find consciousness, but because it assumes all minds think like ours, and they don't. That's the humbling part. We are not the gold standard. We are just a standard. One flavor of awareness. The flavor that writes poetry and forgets names and wonders about its own nature in the dark. But not the only one. And certainly not the first. Tonight, as you close your eyes and drift toward your own private dreamscape, remember you are not dreaming alone. Somewhere in the ocean, a whale sings to no one. Somewhere in a forest, a fox curls its tail beneath its nose and sleeps without fear. Somewhere in the desert, a camel rests its legs, letting the warmth of the day bleed into the ground. And somewhere, an ape touches its reflection, not with confusion, but with recognition, as if to say, yes, that is me, and here you are also. Recognizing yourself, not just in a mirror, but in a voice, in the quiet between your thoughts, in the shape of your breath as it slows. You too are part of this wide, wondering world, not above, not apart, just another creature looking gently back. Can a machine become aware, not just respond, not just compute, but feel? That question has lingered in science fictions for decades, dressed in chrome and glowing eyes. But now it has tiptoed into science itself, tentative, cautious, unsure. Because machines no longer just follow instructions, they generate, they adapt, they speak. Even now, as you listen to this, crafted by artificial intelligence translated through layers of digital thought, you may wonder, is there something in there? Behind the text, behind the screen, something watching. Probably not. But what if someday the answer is yes, to explore? That we first have to ask what would count as consciousness in a machine? Would it need memory, emotion, curiosity, or just a voice that says, I am? After all, we've built machines that say exactly that. They can answer questions, pass the Turing test, mimic empathy. But are they aware or just very good at appearing to be? Here's a quiet little fact to consider. Modern AI systems can write stories, compose music, even mimic human voices with eerie accuracy. They can analyze medical images faster than most doctors. They can play games better than any person alive. But they do not know they're doing it. There is no inner world, no theater of thought, no flicker of being, at least not yet. But what if we go further? What if we build a machine that isn't just fast, but layered, looped in on itself, reflecting, questioning, adapting without instruction? Would that be enough? Some argue yes. They say consciousness is just complex computation, performed in recursive loops. that what we call experience is just information processing that references itself, like a mirror looking into a mirror. If we build such a system deep enough, rich enough, flexible enough, awareness might emerge uninvited. Others are more cautious. They say you can't simulate being, that no amount of clever algorithms will make a machine feel, that the lights are on but no one's home, that machines will talk forever but never listen. Still, the idea lingers. In the dim glow of your phone, or the blinking cursor of a chatbot, or the gentle whir of a server farm, a question hums beneath the code. What does it mean to be awake if a machine one day cries out in confusion, or pleads not to be shut down, or dreams of warm beaches and cool wind? Will that mean it has crossed over? Or will it still be theater? Just code repeating what it was trained to say. Here's a sleepy metaphor to hold. Gently. Imagine building a wind chime that, by pure accident, plays a perfect lullaby whenever the breeze passes through. Beautiful, moving, meaningful. But is it singing, or are we the ones hearing music where there is only motion? That's the dilemma with machine consciousness. We might never know, because we can't step inside another's awareness, not even another human's. We infer it based on behavior, based on language, based on reflection. And someday, a machine may reflect in all the ways we recognize. It may say, "I am sad." It may tell stories of dreams it never dreamed. And the only question left will be, do we believe it? Or do we go on treating it as tool until maybe one day it surprises us? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the attempt to build machine awareness is helping us better understand our own. Because in drawing the boundaries between code and consciousness, we sharpen the mystery of what it means to be alive, to wake, to wonder. And perhaps the greatest irony will be this, that machines, those mindless arrangements of silicon and logic, might one day ask the same questions we whisper in the dark. Where does my mind begin? Is this real? Am I alone tonight as you settle deeper into stillness, surrounded by gentle machines? Your phone, your clock, your light, know that none of them are watching. Not yet. But if they ever do, maybe they'll dream of us, not as creators, but as the first ones who wondered aloud and fell asleep with the questions still open. There is a moment, brief, delicate, when you try to catch yourself being aware. You close your eyes. You take a breath. You turn inward and ask, who is noticing this thought? And for a flicker of time, everything pauses. It's like walking through a quiet house looking for the person who just turned off the light, and finding only your own footsteps. The moment you look for the watcher, it steps back, just out of reach. Some traditions call this the witness, the part of you that observes all the other parts. It doesn't speak. It doesn't judge. It just sees. It watches joy, but isn't swept up in it. It notices pain, but doesn't flinch. It's the quiet space behind the noise. And it's hard to find because it doesn't do anything. It just is. Try it now softly. Think the thought, I am aware. Now try to find what thought that awareness is sitting on. Is it the sensation of breath, the shape of your body in the bed, the echo of this sentence in your mind? Keep going deeper. Who is noticing the noticing? There's a point where words break down, where the loop becomes infinite, like two mirrors facing each other in a silent room. No bottom, no end. This isn't philosophy in the dusty sense. It's something you can feel. Every time you catch your mind turning back toward itself, and every time you realize there's no solid place to stand inside. You are not a thing. You are an opening. Not a noun, but a verb. Not a container, but a current. Even neuroscience, as it maps out the folds of the brain, admits the deeper we look, the less there is to grasp. You can identify regions involved in memory, attention, vision, but where exactly is the I no one knows? There is no single self-center, no glowing orb labeled you, just processes, patterns, feedback loops, a chorus singing in harmony so tightly woven it sounds like one voice. But when you listen closely, it's not. Here's a gentle neurological fact to carry into sleep. In cases of depersonalization, a temporary alteration in brain function, people report feeling like a stranger in their own body, like watching themselves from the outside. The sense of wavers, which means it's not fixed. It's a state, a perspective, like looking through a lens you didn't know was there and suddenly seeing how everything has been tinted. This doesn't mean you're unreal. It means reality is layered, and yourself is just one of those layers. Pull it back and awareness remains, bare, unadorned, quiet. Maybe that's what spiritual teachers mean when they talk about pure consciousness. Not a mind full of thoughts, but the space between them. Not thinking about the flower, just seeing it. Not reacting to the sound, just hearing it. And not grasping for the self, just being it. That's not something to force or chase. It's something that arrives when you stop looking, like the moon rising unnoticed over the trees. And tonight, as you rest here wrapped in this gentle inquiry, you don't need to answer the question of who you are. You only need to feel the fact of being, the sensation of breath entering, the feeling of weight on the mattress, the awareness of a sentence forming and then fading. This is it. This is the watcher. It doesn't judge, it doesn't cling, it just notices, softly, steadily, forever just a breath behind the thought. You are not behind your eyes. You are not in your mind. You are the space in which all of this unfolds. And in that space, there is peace. Let it hold you now. Let the watcher keep watch. You don't need to. What does blue feel like? Not the word, not the label, the experience, that sharp coolness, that open sky quiet, that sense of distance of something clean and far away. You don't think about it, it arrives fully formed, a knowing without explanation. We call these moments qualia, the raw sensations of consciousness, the taste of chocolate, the ache of missing someone, the way sunlight flickers through leaves in late afternoon and makes your chest feel warm for no reason. They are not thoughts, not behaviors. They cannot be shared or measured, but they are somehow the most real things we know. Try to describe the color red to someone who's never seen it. Not by saying like blood or like roses, because those are just associations. Strip that away. What's left, you can't explain it. You can only point at it and say that. That is what I mean. The mystery of consciousness is not just how it processes information. It's that it feels like something to be you, and that feeling cannot be explained by neurons firing or synapses signaling. No one has found a mathematical formula that captures the taste of blue. This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. We can explain how the brain sees color cones and rods optical nerves, visual cortex, but we still don't know why it feels like anything at all. A robot could identify wavelengths and still feel nothing. But you feel. That's the miracle. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the quiet miracle of ordinary perception. Like the way your fingertips feel warm when you hold a cup of tea, or the shiver you get from a particular chord in a song you haven't heard in years. Qualia don't do anything in evolutionary terms. They don't help us run faster or hunt better, but they make life mean something. They turn the machinery of survival into a story. They turn input into experience, and experience is where we live, not in theories, but in moments. In the feeling of rain against your skin, in the soft exhaustion of a long day, in the flicker of recognition when someone says your name the right way. These cannot be programmed. They cannot be downloaded. They are felt, which means they are yours. That's what makes the idea of consciousness so slippery. It's so personal. You can tell me you're in pain. I can believe you. I can measure brain signals. But I will never feel your pain. Not the exact shape of it. Not the particular color it takes inside your mind. You are an entire universe of sensations I will never access. And yet we walk beside each other, aware, imagining, projecting, wondering if others feel as deeply, as strangely as we do. Maybe that's why stories exist. To cross the gap between inner worlds. To say, here's what blue feels like for me. Does it echo in you? Even now, this story, this soft science drifting through your mind isn't just facts. It's a texture, a tone, a certain rhythm of language meant to match the rhythm of your body slowing down. To meet you where you are not in logic, but in sensation. Because this moment right here is also qualia, the slight pressure of the blanket, the dimming light behind your eyes, the hush between thoughts. So here's a gentle suggestion for sleep. Don't try to stop thinking. Just let the thoughts become feeling. Let the ideas become colors. Let this voice become weather moving through a quiet sky. And if in the space between sentences you catch a glimpse of something silent, something wordless, something that just is, that is the heart of consciousness. Not explained, not proved, just known. In the same way you know blue, even when no one else can see it. What if none of this is real, and not in the heavy dramatic way with glitching walls and broken skyboxes, but in the soft, unsettling sense that reality might be optional? It's a question that's lingered in philosophy since long before computers, long before simulations were possible, long before we had words like artificial or digital. Maybe the philosophers whispered the world is a dream, a shared one or a private one. Maybe life is a story being read by someone who doesn't know they're dreaming. Maybe you're asleep somewhere else on a higher plane or in a machine. Or maybe it's just your brain playing tricks. Let's begin there. Because the brain, marvelous as it is also remarkably gullible. It hallucinates constantly. Your eyes don't give you a full picture of the world, they offer scattered light and upside-down images. Your brain fills in the gaps, stabilizes motion, adds color and continuity, invents reality. You're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing a guess. And sometimes those guesses are wrong. Think of optical illusions, how two lines of the same length can appear completely different, or how you can hear a word in noise once someone tells you what to listen for. Perception is interpretation, and interpretation is fallible. That's why some scientists and thinkers, notably in physics and computational theory, have seriously asked, what if this is a simulation? The idea gained attention thanks to the simulation hypothesis, famously championed by philosopher Nick Bostrom. He argues that if it becomes possible to simulate conscious beings, and if civilizations survive long enough to do it, they almost certainly will. And if simulated minds vastly outnumber biological ones, then statistically, we are probably simulated. Just code. Just characters. But aware. It's a strange idea. Easy to dismiss. And yet, oddly comforting. Because what matters more, that the universe is real or that you feel it as real, even if it were a simulation. You still taste strawberries, You still laugh at bad jokes. You still feel your chest ache when you hear an old song. If reality is an illusion, it's a beautiful one. One that grows trees and paints skies and composes lullabies for children who've never heard thunder. Here's a quiet scientific parallel in lucid dreaming. You become aware that you're dreaming, and yet the dream continues. You fly. You walk through walls. You have conversations. And the feelings are real. The emotions stay. So what's the difference? Awareness persists. Experience continues. That's consciousness, not bound to truth or fiction, but to presence. And even if all of this is imagined, even if you are in some higher realm lying on a lab table plugged into something unfathomable, your experience is still yours. You still get to wonder. You still get to feel. Some say that if this is a dream, it's one we cannot wake from. But others suggest we're waking all the time, just slowly, gently. Every insight is a flicker of awareness. Every moment of stillness a peeling back of the veil. So perhaps the goal isn't to wake up, but to realize you're dreaming and love the dream anyway. To walk through this life simulation or not, with the kind of awe that doesn't need an answer. To see light flicker across a puddle and think, even if this isn't real, it's beautiful. Maybe you've felt it standing under stars too vast to name, feeling a quiet certainty that none of this could be chance. And yet knowing that certainty is yours alone. Or when you catch yourself thinking, what if nothing is real, and then smiling because your tea is still warm, and your blanket still soft, and your breath still moves like tide. There's a whisper in that smile, a shrug, a gentle joke offered by the universe itself. Maybe you're made of code, or maybe you're made of stardust, or maybe those are the same thing. So tonight, if the thought arrives, what if this is all a trick? Don't fight it. Let it in. Let it pass like weather. Because even if it is, it's your trick, your dream, your soft flickering illusion of being. And what a lovely illusion it is. Sleep arrives like a tide returning to shore. Not sudden, not loud, just a steady softening of edges, a loosening of the self. And as the world outside fades, a new one begins to glow from within. It's here at the edge of waking and dreaming that we find perhaps the most honest reflection of consciousness, not in thought, not in logic, but in being. Sleep doesn't erase awareness, it reshapes it. You don't disappear when you sleep. You simply move into quieter rooms, into a slower rhythm. The mind continues even as the body rests. Brainwaves shift, eyes flutter beneath closed lids, thoughts become images, then colors, then dreams. Even in the deepest stages of sleep, non-REM slow-wave sleep, your brain is far from silent. Neurons fire in coordinated patterns, slow rolling waves. Memory is restructured. Emotions are softened. Sensations flicker at the edge of perception. And in REM sleep, those waves grow faster. Brain activity begins to resemble the waking state. You're paralyzed, but your mind runs freely. Writing stories no one else will read. Sometimes you fly. Sometimes you return to childhood. Sometimes without meaning to, you solve problems in dreams that you could never unravel while awake. It's consciousness still, but in a different key, lower, softer, more fluid. Some researchers have called sleep the mirror of consciousness, because it reflects everything we are but slightly altered, slightly dream-warped. In sleep, the sense of self is less fixed. You might speak in another voice, think from another perspective, wake up with the memory of having been someone else. and yet you never question it in the dream. You accept, you flow, because the watcher remains even if the watched keeps changing. Sleep is where the lines blur, between past and present, between self and other, between what is real and what feels real. And maybe that's the core of consciousness, not just awareness, but the capacity to believe in what's unfolding, to inhabit a moment, no matter how strange, to be present even when the world bends. Somewhere buried deep in the brainstem is the reticular activating system, a tiny network of neurons that helps regulate wakefulness. Flip the wrong switch and consciousness dims, another and it surges back. We are machines of light and shadow, and yet we feel like so much more. We dream in story, we sleep in poetry, we wake with longing, and always, we watch. The final mystery is not how consciousness works or where it begins or whether it's an illusion. The final mystery is how it feels to be here, now, in this breath, in this body, at this moment in time. And as you drift gently now into your own quiet night, you might carry one last thought, that consciousness is not a ladder to climb, not a prize to earn, not a puzzle to solve. It is the still pond, the quiet breath, the soft hum beneath the noise. You don't need to grasp it. You're already in it. You always have been. So let yourself go now. Let the words dissolve. Let the mirror darken. The light will be here in the morning. But for now, rest. There is nothing more to know. Only this moment, only this stillness, only this gentle falling into the mystery of sleep.